My friend Jack lived in a quiet and remote neighborhood, where all the neighbors knew each other and felt very safe. One night in the middle of winter, Jack, who was alone at home, noticed that the lights in the yard suddenly turned on and off. At first, he thought it was a wiring problem, but after a few minutes, he had a strange feeling. He was checking the windows when he heard a heavy sound from the back door, the sound of gasping and knocking on the door. He approached with apprehension and looked through the small window next to the door. There he saw a man in tattered clothes clinging terribly to the door. The man was knocking on the door slowly with his hand and muttering under his breath. Jack called the police and locked the door, too scared to move. But the man did not calm down and started knocking harder on the door, as if he was losing control. He was yelling that he needed to get in and was apparently trying to get into the house through the window glass next to the door. Just then, the sound of breaking glass was heard and Jack saw the man staring at him through the window with wide eyes. He immediately ran to a room inside the house and locked the door behind him. The psychotic man had broken into the house and the sound of his heavy footsteps could be heard on the floor of the house. After a few minutes, there was a heavy silence, but moments later a man's chatter was heard from the back of the room. A quiet but menacing voice that said, "I know you're here. I'll find you eventually." After some time, the police arrived at the place and arrested the man who was trying to enter the room. After the investigation, it was found that this person escaped from a nearby mental hospital and had been wandering around the same area for a few days, looking for someone to harm him. This terrible experience made Jack not return to his home for a while.
One night, when my friend, Sarah, and I decided to spend the night at her house, neither of us knew that it would turn out to be one of the scariest nights of our lives. Sarah's house was located in the suburbs, where it was very peaceful and a neighborhood where suspicious incidents never happened. But that night, everything changed. It was almost midnight when we heard a knock on the door. At first, we thought it might be one of the neighbors, but when we looked at the door, we didn't see anyone. Then there was another knock on the door, louder this time. Sarah was a little scared, but since she had always lived in a safe neighborhood, she decided to open the door. When he opened the door, a tall man with terrified eyes and an expressionless face was standing in front of the door. He was wearing dirty and disheveled clothes and his face looked very tired and sick. At first, Sarah asked him what he wanted, but the man didn't answer. He just started walking into the house with his eyes shining brightly. Sarah closed the door in panic and asked me to call the police immediately. But before we could do anything, the man rushed in. He started screaming and attacked us. His face had changed scarily and he seemed to have no mental control over himself. While Sarah tried to get away from him, I started to plan our escape in my head. He had attacked Sarah and I quickly approached him from behind and tried to push him away from Sarah. Fortunately, after a few minutes, the police were heard and the man ran to the door in fear and ran away. A few minutes later, the police came and arrested the man. But we could never forget what that man had in his eyes. He was a psychopath who had become extremely unstable due to mental illness and had invaded our home. A few days later, we were informed that he had done the same thing several times before in different neighborhoods, but no one had been able to stop him. This incident was not only scary, but it made us pay more attention to security and mental care in society forever. The terror we experienced that night showed us that we must always be cautious and prepared, even in places we think are perfectly safe.